Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today let's make a Protractor side fan fold shirt. The protractor that I'm using is a really large one. It's one that I found at Harbor Freight. I'm going to find an area on the shirt where I'd like for the center of my fan folds to be. I'm going to use a washable marker and make a mark on that spot. Then I'm going to place the 0 on the protractor on that mark. My protractor has an arm that you can tighten or loosen to move. I'm going to loosen it so I can move it freely. Then using my protractor as a guide, I'm going to draw an arc on the shirt, and I'm going to continue that arc on around onto the sleeve of the shirt. I'm sorry, my head kind of got in the way a couple of times when I was doing this part of the video. Now I'm going to place the protractor back on that initial mark, and every 10 degrees on the protractor, I'm going to make a small mark on the shirt with my washable marker. I'm going to use these marks in just a little while to draw lines on the shirt. Using a long straight edge, I'm going to draw lines on the shirt every 10 degrees. I'm going to start the lines at that initial center point of the fan fold, and I'm going to extend the lines through the marks that I made on the shirt out to the outer edges of the shirt. I'm going to go ahead and speed the video up some, but if you'd like to watch it a little bit slower, there's a settings icon on YouTube. If you click into that, you can choose the playback speed. You can either speed it up more or you can slow it down. To help make the folding process a little bit easier, I'm going to use some multi-purpose sewing clips, which are pretty small. I purchased these from Amazon, and I'll put a link for these down below in the description. And I also have some plastic clothespins. You can use any clothespins. These just kind of open up a little bit wider, and I haven't actually used them for ice dyeing, so there are no potential little dye remnants left on them. My wooden ones I would not use on a shirt like this because I would be too concerned that maybe there would be a few little dye specks. I'm going to start with the first line that I drew on the shirt. I'm going to pinch that line, and I'm going to attach some of the little small clips to hold that fold. Then the second line is actually going to be the bottom fold on the shirt. So I'm going to skip that line, and I'm going to go to the next line and do the same thing. So every other line that I've drawn on the shirt is going to be a top seam, and every other bottom line on the shirt is going to be the bottom fold or the bottom seam. Right now my folds are pretty small. I don't have a lot of fabric, so I can use these small sewing clips. I'm going to continue this process all along the shirt. At some point, these small clips aren't going to hold the fabric anymore, so that's when I'm going to change over and start using the plastic clothespins. Which, by the way, if you don't have clothespins, you can use any kind of clips or clamps or whatever you want. It's just easier if you use something to help hold these folds nice and crisp. Where the folds are really small toward the center of the fan fold area, I'm going to use a spatula that's on the end of one of my stainless steel lab spoons. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and speed this up a little bit too, but here again, you can slow it down if you prefer to. Okay, that took quite a while, but now I'm going to tidy up some of these smaller folds, and then I'm going to tie up the entire shirt with some kite string. I'm choosing to use kite string because I want to allow the dye to flow the entire length of the shirt, and I don't really want any of the white definition lines. I did go ahead and add a couple of rubber bands to the shirt just to hold the folds in place until I could get some kite string on it. For this shirt, I've chosen some blues and some grays. And I'm going to incline ice dye this shirt, so I've placed the shirt down inside of a long piece of vinyl guttering. I buy my vinyl guttering at Lowe's, and I actually think it comes in like 10-foot sections. Honestly, I bought this guttering once, and I haven't had to buy it since. I mean, it'll last a really long time. I took one of the long pieces of vinyl guttering and cut it in half. So the piece of vinyl guttering that I'm using right now is about 5 feet long. This is great for these really long folds like this that don't fit down into the shorter pieces of vinyl guttering. They're a little bit harder to navigate because they don't fit on the table quite as well, but they're great for a fold like this. So because this fold is so narrow but tall, I need something to kind of keep it from moving around in the vinyl guttering. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of rig up something to hold things in place. I am going to use some plastic cutting boards, which I purchased from the Dollar Tree dollar store. And I have some pieces of that I've cut, but those aren't quite tall enough to be able to put ice on top of the shirt. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to move those up toward the top of the fold, and then I'm going to take a brand new piece of plastic cutting board and cut it in half. That's going to be a little bit taller. It's going to hold things in place a little bit better. And then to keep that vinyl cutting board right up next to the shirt, I'm going to use some of my plastic dye bottles. So you just kind of have to be creative in order to make yourself ice barriers and ways to do these funky folds. I mean, this one, I thought about just turning it on its side and applying the dye that way, but it's not going to give me quite the same effect. I want the dye to be able to run the entire distance of those folds. I also tied a piece of kite string at the very end of this fold and then attached the kite string to the end of the vinyl guttering so the shirt doesn't slide all the way down. Because it's mostly dry too, I went ahead and sprayed it with a little bit of soda ash solution so that the dye would stick to the top better. While I'm applying the dye, I went ahead and took the plastic cutting board out of the piece of vinyl guttering. I couldn't get to the shirt as well with the pieces of plastic right in the way. So I'll add those back later. The colors that I'm going to apply to this shirt are Nightfall from Dye Spin, Ashes to Ashes from Dharma Trading Company, and Ashes to Ashes is one of the special order Dharma Trading Company colors. You can usually still purchase it on a Facebook group called Tie-Dye Supplies Marketplace. People purchase those from Dharma in large quantities, and then they repackage them into smaller quantities to sell. I have a link down below this video in the description to that Facebook group. Then I'm using Frost from Delula Company, Iron Gray from Dye Spin, and Wedgwood Blue from Dharma Trading Company. I'm kind of jumping around a little bit when I'm applying the dyes just so that I can get them spaced out properly, but I gave the color names to you in the order which they are on the shirt. I'm also going to leave a little bit of white space in between each color to allow the dye some space to move. Okay, so before I apply the Wedgwood to the very end portion, I'm going to go ahead and put back in these pieces of plastic cutting board. After I have the dye on the shirt, I'm going to add a sprinkle of soda ash over the top. Now I'm going to place a layer of ice on top of the shirt. And this is kind of the trick, is getting the ice to stay on top of the shirt. The plastic cutting boards give me a little extra space where I can really pile the ice on in a couple of areas, which is nice. Otherwise, I would have to find some other setup in order to be able to incline this shirt. To incline the shirt, I'm using a plastic container that has pretty tall sides. I'm going to place one end of this vinyl guttering down inside of the bottom of the container and leave the other end hanging over the edge. To keep this whole entire contraption from shifting too much, I'm going to place a wiffle ball down in the very bottom of the guttering. That'll kind of keep all of this thing from sliding down to the end. Even though I've tied a piece of kite string onto the other end, this is just kind of a little insurance policy. I'm going to touch up the ice just a little bit, and then I used a clothespin, kind of attached it to some of these longer pieces of plastic cutting board to try to keep everything together a little better. It's a little precarious. I went ahead and put this container aside and I allowed the ice to melt. And after the first layer of ice melted, I came back, had quite a bit of dye left on top, so I added a second layer of ice. Then I pulled the shirt out of the guttering and kind of looked at it. And right in that very bottom portion, I had just a little bit of white area. That was the tallest part of the shirt where I kept having a problem getting the dye and the ice to stay on top. Since that was where the Wedgwood blue was, I just added a little bit of Wedgwood blue to that part of the shirt, a couple of ice cubes, and let it continue processing. After all the ice melted, I placed this shirt down inside of a container with a lid, put the lid on it, and then I placed it outside for probably about 36 hours to allow it to process where it was nice and warm. Then I took the shirt to my utility sink and I began rinsing it in cold water to rinse out the soda ash. I untied the shirt and warmed the water up to hot and continued rinsing in hot water to rinse out the excess dye that didn't bond with the fabric. Instead of just rinsing for a long time, I added some really hot water to my utility sink, placed a little bit of Blue Dawn dish detergent in the water, put the shirt inside, and I allowed it to soak. When the water cooled off, I changed it out, and I continued that soaking process until the water was remaining almost clear. Then I placed the shirt along with some Dharma's professional textile detergent into my washing machine, and I washed it using a hot water cycle. Okay, so I've washed, dried, and ironed the shirt, and let's see what this shirt looks like. Okay, so what do you guys think? I think this one looks really cool. I love these Protractor shirts where the folds are just perfect and the dye streaks the whole way down the shirt. I think that looks really cool. I also really like the color combination. That Nightfall is the really dark color right at the center where the fan folds start. And then the kind of purpley and really dark color is coming from the Ashes to Ashes. The frost is that bright blue, which is right in the center of the shirt. Then, of course, the iron gray is that lighter gray, and the Wedgwood blue is right at the very edges of the shirt, the part that has really cool color splits. So I think these 5 colors work so well together. I like blues and grays together anyway, and I think the color splits in these colors work well together. I also think that the combination of the frost and the Ashes to Ashes, that area of the shirt almost looks like feathers or arrows or something. I think it's really cool. So overall, I really love the shirt. I think it's really pretty. I like the look of it, and I like the perfect little trails of dye going down the shirt. But what do you guys think? Please drop me some comments down below and let me know. And if you've enjoyed the video, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it and if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.